Hello, and welcome back to Red, White, and Weekly. We are counting down each week until next July 4th of 2026, the 250th birthday of our great nation, the United States of America. Again, my name is Kelly Haven. I'm happy to have you with me. So what happened this first week of July in 1775? Well, I would love to introduce you to someone. Meet George Washington, the general and the power of presence. He was born in the Tidewater soil of Virginia in 1732 at a modest plantation named Pope's Creek. George Washington was not born to a crown, nor destined for greatness, at least not in the eyes of the British Empire. He was the son of Augustine and Mary Ball Washington. He was the eldest of 6 children from his father's second marriage. When George was only 11, unfortunately, his father died, and the promise of an education abroad died with him. Without formal schooling, Washington learned at home. But more than books, it was the land that educated him. The tobacco fields, the wide rivers, the dense woods and beautiful mountains of Virginia. He trained as a surveyor in his teens, mapping the raw frontier and learning to move quietly and to observe. These years taught him patience and resilience, qualities he would draw on again and again throughout his life. His older half-brother, Lawrence, became a father figure. Lawrence had married into the influential Fairfax family and helped young George step into Virginia's upper echelon. Through Lawrence, George joined the Virginia militia, and by 21, he was thrown into the storm of imperial conflict, the French and Indian War. It was there, in the dark forests of the Ohio Valley, that Washington gained his first taste of war. He led men into skirmishes. He felt the sting of defeat, and he watched comrades die in the chaos of musket fire and retreat. His first major command was at Fort Necessity in 1754, and that ended in surrender. However, even in failure, Washington earned a reputation for bravery and stoicism. He learned the hard lessons of leadership, not from a textbook, but from the muddy roads, the freezing tents, and the ever-thin line between order and collapse. Washington, maybe not a brilliant strategist, but he was composed, fiercely committed, and he had presence. People followed him because they trusted him. He may not have been the greatest field commander in some historians' eyes, yet no one else could have held that fledgling American army together. What made him great may not have been genius on the battlefield, but the force of his presence and his character. Washington taught himself to lead through discipline, through manners, through restraint. As a young man, he copied the book 110 Rules of Civility to master etiquette, believing that self-control and dignity were not just virtues, but also tools of power. He became a man others trusted, calm under fire, and I have read that quite a few times about Washington. And he was also very respectful of his men, and we will touch on that in this episode. He was wise enough to surround himself with very capable minds. Some of the greatest leaders are delegators. They know what their strengths are and who else may be better at other tasks. They move their talent around within whatever puzzle they are trying to solve. And in a revolution born in chaos, Washington's greatness was not in seizing control, but in commanding trust. That is why he led the army, and that is why the army followed him into battle, an eventual victory against the then greatest world power on earth. He was also a physically commanding man. Here's a description from a friend of his at the time. He's grown into a huge figure of a man at 6'2" in his stocking feet and weighing 180 pounds. He has well-developed muscles, wide shoulders. He is neatly waisted. He has blue-gray penetrating eyes. I have read his physical presence in and of itself would command a room as he entered. Supposedly, the women swooned over General George Washington. He was rumored to be an excellent dancer. Now, by 1759, he left the military and settled into life as a planter at Mount Vernon. He married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children. Washington worked the land, served in the Virginia House of Burgesses, and grew increasingly wary of British overreach. He believed in order, in loyalty, but he also believed in liberty. And so, when the colonies called in 1775, George Washington answered. As July opens, George Washington was riding north from Philadelphia, newly appointed commander of a ragtag collection of New England militia, encamped outside of Boston. He had seen the pomp of British arms. Now he was about to meet his own army. He had no illusions, but he carried with him decades of hard-won wisdom and a quiet iron determination to see this experiment through. It is the summer of 1775. The smoke from Bunker Hill still lingers, and the air is thick with uncertainty. 13 colonies, unready for nationhood, now find themselves marching toward revolution. This is the story of a country not yet born. Cambridge, Massachusetts, July 2nd of 1775. General Washington arrives at Cambridge to take command of this Continental Army. Now he is not met with a grand parade, but with a bitter reality of war. The men he inherits are farmers and tradesmen. Few are trained. Washington surveys his new army. Quote from Washington, "Ragtag, barely trained, half-starving, and woefully unequipped." End quote. He sees troopers trudging through mud, some greeting him with hope, others with skepticism. The sight tugs at Washington, both humility and also burden. He realizes that forging discipline and unity out of such a disparate mob will define his command. The men do wear mismatched coats, and they carry muskets of all kinds. Some have no muskets at all. They are cooking over smoky campfires. Their rations are meager. Their boots are worn through. But Washington sees something else. He sees potential. He sees possibility. And he sees purpose. These are free men. Rough, yes, but not without courage. If order and discipline can be instilled, they will fight. Quote from Washington. Now, Washington's plan is clear. Impose discipline, train hard, provide dignity where none has been offered before. Now, from a soldier's perspective, they watch Washington closely. He is tall, dressed sharply, and carries himself like no man they have ever known. Some are in awe, and others are skeptical. Quote, "He looks every inch a general, but we are weary, hungry. Some of us thought this would be over quickly. It is not," end quote. They had expected a stand with their local militia, not months under tents, not the grinding drill of military order, but they feel something shift. Under Washington, they begin to call themselves the Army. In Philadelphia, John Adams is in Congress. He's pacing. Quote from Adams, "While the enemy gathers, we linger in debate. Congress moves like molasses," end quote. Adams is growing impatient with the indecision. The colonies have declared resistance, but won't yet declare independence. Washington has no navy, few supplies, and no guarantee of reinforcements. Adams knows time is running out. Quote again from Adams, "I fear we shall lose, not by sword, but by slowness," end quote. Now, civilians and loyalists alike, had their own fears. And here's just a perspective from the loyalist side. Across the colonies, civilians live in fear. In Boston, British troops and loyalists clash with patriot sentiment. In New York, Loyalist newspapers accused the rebels of sedition, which means to incite a rebellion. And absolutely, of course, that was what was going on. In the countryside, reports emerged of patriots tarring and feathering those who remained loyal to Britain, the crown. Here's a quote from a loyalist. "We must flee. Neighbors whisper our names. There is no safety," end quote. Another loyalist perspective. The rebels grow bolder by the day, and yet Congress still pretends at legality. This is sedition dressed as liberty. We loyal subjects must now fear our own neighbors more than any foreign foe, end quote. The Loyalists were American, not Englishmen. They felt, however, that the best interest of the colonies would be served by remaining a part of the greater empire. Loyalists continue to labor under heavy and grievous burdens because they believed that England's sense of justice would soon lead to the removal of these hardships, that Britain would come to the rescue. Hence, before independence through revolution became the paramount issue, many Loyalists favored mild measures such as non-importation and non-exportation. From the hills of Cambridge, a patriot soldier writes home, quote, "We are lodged upon the heights, no shoes, few blankets, yet General Washington rides through our camp each day. He looks at us like we matter," end quote. Now, to recap this first week of July of 1775, Washington, tasked with shaping a national army from ragged militia, feels both anxious but also determined. The soldiers, barefoot and confused, begin to cohere, however, under their new leader. John Adams, deeply impatient, frets over Congress's sluggish support. Civilians, both patriot and loyalists, live in fear of one another, social violence, and loss of rights and safety. So begins the work of revolution. Not a single act of defiance, but 1,000 daily struggles. Not just heroes on battlefields, but also civilians living in fear, soldiers marching without shoes, and leaders like George Washington forging a nation from hope and smoke. This is the story of July of 1775, a country not yet born, but stirring,